Hey guys, welcome back to the Identity Sports Podcast. We got a very special guest with us today in Bobby Smith. He is just an incredible athlete, incredible person, family man. He four-time NHL All-Star, number one overall draft pick. Even in junior hockey leagues, you outscored a guy that some people might know in Wayne Gretzky. So just all these incredible accolades, but we also want to understand and talk through, who Bobby is as a person and your relationship with Jesus. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, so let's kind of break the ice a little bit for our listeners. Let's go through a fast facts segment. So I'm going to ask you some quick questions, just kind of spat out the answers, and we'll go from there.
All right.
Awesome. So this question actually comes from a listener. So they knew that you were going to be coming in today, and they were a huge fan. You were their childhood hero. So they said age and sanctification can lead to more wisdom. Looking back at your career, is there anything you would have done differently as a teammate?
You know what? That's a very interesting question. My sister-in-law asked me that the other day, and one kind of inside baseball thing, I would have used a longer stick. When I was a kid, my dad said, "Gordy, how you use the short stick? You're going to use the short stick." Now, I did all right, but looking back, I think I'd use a longer one. And as a teammate, I think I would have made a conscious effort to be a better teammate. I was an offensive player. I got drafted first overall, so I got drafted to the worst team in the league. And when I got traded to Montreal, they had lost in the playoffs three straight the year before, and they had not scored a goal in that playoff series until the third period of game three. So it was clear they didn't bring me to Montreal to block shots.
Yeah.
I was there to be the offensive catalyst. I led the team in scoring most years I played in Montreal. But I think looking back, I remember, and I think it's easier to do that when you're not an offensive player. I remember sitting beside a teammate of mine, Bob Gainey, and one of the best captains to be part of an NHL team, and we won about four in a row. And I'm thinking, hey, great, we just beat Quebec, and he shakes his head and said, Mike over there, Mike's had a couple of bad games. I'm going to take him out for lunch tomorrow, just see what's on his mind. And I'm thinking, man, I'm worried about myself. The team expects me to go out there and generate offense for me. And here you are in the middle of a winning streak, and you're saying there's a guy on the other side of the room who needs me. And so, when you say that, and it's a hard thing to admit, but I would have tried a lot to be a better teammate. Not
Yeah.
that I was a poison in the dressing room
Yeah.
or anything, but there's a difference, as the example I just outlined.
Yeah, well, there's definitely something too to just having a winning culture. I mean, seeing that the way that those are set up, and there's a lot of things that go unnoticed of guys being conscious of teammates and how they're feeling and doing those things, taking them to lunch. So
Yeah, Montreal was really a special place. They are, there was a sign in the dressing room, "To you from failing hands, we hold the torch, be yours to hold it high," which is, of course, is from a poem from a guy who was dying on the battlefield in World War One. And there was really a feeling in Montreal that, you can do that on other teams, but we don't do that here. This is a special place. And, I came from the Minnesota North Stars. We had been in the semifinals and we had been in the finals. It's not like we were at the bottom of the league. But I got to Montreal and I felt like, wow, these guys are serious about hockey. And these guys are serious about winning. And it was it was a wake-up call for me. And I was 25 when I got there.
yeah, that's cool. I love hearing those stories like that. So even kind of before going into your NHL career, so you actually in the Ontario Hockey Association, you won the award for the scoring title, and you were actually 10 points higher than a guy named Wayne Gretzky. Besides that, what do you think is kind of like your favorite moment of just junior hockey?
I think my favorite year of hockey my entire life was my second year of junior. I was played as a 17-year-old my first year. I got 24 goals. I was a third line player. And the second year I came back and I scored 65 goals. And I realized then, wow, if I want to be an NHL player, I can be an NHL player. I was the leading goal scorer in the league. I can remember early in the season, Hamilton came into our play us, and they had the number one player in the country. And I was ready for him. And I went out and I got 2 goals and 4 assists that night, and we smacked them. And I said to myself, wow, I'm not saying I'm better than Dale McCourt, but if he's the best player in the country, I can play in the NHL. And that was a real shock for me. And now the next year I go, and I've had to talk about this many times, outscoring Wayne Gretzky. Of course, what happened after that? Because I got 1,000 points in the NHL and he got 3,000. Well, the truth of the matter was I was 19 and he was 16. I was 210 pounds. My 2 wingers were both first round picks. And Wayne weighed about 166, I think, at that point. So I did pass him in the second half of the scoring, but it's almost a good news, bad news thing because, hey, cool, you beat Wayne Gretzky. What happened after that?
Yeah, well, you don't always have to talk about
What
happened after. You always have that leg up.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, you both had obviously phenomenal NHL careers, and so, but yes, you will always have that over Wayne Gretzky,
that's right.
junior. So that's cool. Kind of focusing not necessarily always on the highlights. What was the hardest challenge that you actually had to overcome in your career?
We played in the finals in '81, and we played against the New York Islanders, and they were the dynasty team. They won 4 in a row. They probably had 3 of the best 7 players in the world on their team. And I got the feeling that at the end of that series that we didn't give it our best. You know, we were an underdog team. We upset Boston in the first round. We upset Buffalo in the second round. We upset Calgary in the third round. And it was like, and we were literally just happy to be there. And they beat us, and they probably would have beat us anyway. They were the best team. But I remember 5 years later being with Montreal, and we got together the night before the final series started. And the coach said, hey, we got some guys in this room who won the Stanley Cup. Let's you guys stand up and say something. Well, Bob Gainey spoke, Mario Tremblay spoke, Larry Robinson spoke. And I put up my hand and said, hey, I'm the only guy in this room who's been to the finals and lost. Can I say a few words? They said, hey, go ahead. And I said, I played in the finals 5 years ago. And as crazy as it sounds, we didn't give it our best. And so I'm going to ask every guy in this room to pretend that 2 weeks from now, you can never play hockey again. You've got to pour everything you've got into these next 2 weeks. And I think that in fact, the coach wrote a book afterwards and said, that changed things. But I felt really strongly, it's a great accomplishment to get to the finals. You win 3 playoff series, you get there, but you don't get many chances at it. And as I said, I played in the finals 4 times. We won that year. I wouldn't go double or nothing on the one I won. And it's but that 1981 still stings me because they jumped out to a 3-0 lead, beat us 4 games to 1, and we should have put up a better fight than that.
Yeah. There's always those little things that you always wish, just like earlier when we were talking about if you go back in your career, there's always those things we wish we could change or go back and relive. And that's what I love about this podcast is a chance for us to pour into so that people listening can hear those and hopefully don't make the same mistakes or learn from
And
that.
I had that opportunity the 20 years that I owned the junior hockey team in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I used to say to the general manager who played for 10 years for the Blackhawks, I'd say, hey, if we don't tell these guys, who's going to tell them? And to just understand, practice is at 4 o'clock. It's okay to get to the rink at 3:15. It's okay to show your teammates and your coach, I'm here to work today, and we're going to be on the ice from 4 till 5:30, and we're going to be a better team at 5:30 than we were at 4 o'clock. You don't have to come running into the room at 5 to 4 and hoping to get on the ice in time. And hey, that's experience.
Yeah, I love that mindset of we're at 5:30, you're going to be a better player than you were at the start of practice. Because going into that, there's a goal every practice. So I love that mindset. What is your favorite book in the Bible?
You know what? I am spending a lot of time with Romans right now.
Okay.
And I just find the arguments that Paul is making, and when he talks about the spirit and the flesh, and I'm spent a lot of time with it this morning, and I'm just finding and the commentaries about that, and just how to approach your faith, and Acts I love as well. But maybe because I'm in Romans right now, and one of my Bible studies is talking about Romans. That's Paul is he lays the case out like no one else can. And when you read it and you read it slowly and you reread it, wow, it smacks you upside the head.
Yeah, it truly does. It's such a great book, and to go back and reread it and really focus on every verse and the way
Yeah.
one of my favorite things to do is to also take into account of who it was written to at the time too, and their suffering and what they're going through. And so that's cool. I love asking the favorite book question because everyone has favorite verses, but there's
Yeah.
always a book that seems to be maybe just a theme of our lives or something like
Yeah.
that we find ourselves keep
Yeah.
going back to. But so again, that was kind of it for our Fast Facts segment. So thank you for taking part of that.
All right.
Again, for those listening, we're here with Bobby Smith. He was a 4-time NHL All-Star, went to the Stanley Cup winner. Also ended up spending time as the general manager for the Arizona Coyotes for a while. So very distinguished background in the NHL world. So thanks again for being here. As we kind of turn the page and go a little bit deeper, tell us a little bit about your career and just the inside look of what it was like and what the daily life as an NHL player looked like for you.
Well, it's a very consuming career. You play 80 games plus playoffs. If you get to the finals, you can play over 100 games. You're 2.5 games a week before Christmas and 3.5 games a week after Christmas. And it's very competitive. You compete with your teammates. And I always played. I played on a lot of good teams. I played, I think 184 playoff games. The number of guys who have played more playoff games than me, the list isn't long. Mm-hmm. And so, I really enjoyed that. Being with good players, playing against good players. Guys with the divisions. We played against Quebec 8 times. You got played against a guy named Peter Stastny, who I think is the most underrated player, during my decade. And it was just fun. It's competitive. And in Montreal, it was important. It was, people, I can remember playing in Minnesota at the beginning of my career. What's the crowd going to be like today? Well, in Montreal, we played to 107% of seating capacity every game. And I played with great players and, had a chance to win the Stanley Cup every year. The season would start. These 4 or 5 or 6 teams could win at the end. But I enjoyed being a good player. I didn't enjoy being a player. And the end of my career, it was a very easy decision for me to retire because when I was 35, I was no longer a good player. And I could go to the rink when I was 25 and say, if I play really well tonight, I can be the difference between winning and losing. I can get a goal and assist, and instead of losing 3-2, we're going to win 4-3. And, my teammates are counting on me, and, this is important what I'm doing. And I can remember at the end of my career saying, if I play really well tonight, I'll get 6 minutes of ice time. If I don't play so well, I'll get 3. And one thing that's really strange, I was walking last year of my career. I was 35 and I'm walking down the long steps from the dressing room to the ice surface in Minnesota. I started and finished my career in Minnesota. And I said to myself, I could get a stick in the eye tonight and go around the rest of my life with only one eye. And I said, Bobby, you're finished. I should have turned around and gone right back to the dressing room then. Because at that point, regular season and playoffs, I played 1,300 games. And the thought of going down onto the ice that I could get hurt tonight never occurred to me once. And, I laugh. When I was 25, if I went a few games without a goal, they'd change my wingers. When I was 35, if I went a couple of games without a goal, I'd go to the press box. So it's just, you enjoyed being a good player on a good team in a place where people cared about hockey. And no, I got a real kick out of it. I really enjoyed it. You think about your friends in your hometown, and they'll get up and read the paper the next morning. And Montreal beat Calgary last night. Bobby got a goal and assist. Hey, good start to my day. It's fun.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of going from feeling like you were a difference maker on the team to then towards the end of your career feeling like, hey, I'm just lucky if I get some ice time tonight. What does that do mentally for you as an athlete? Was it like, did you find yourself worth in that and that was hard to work through? Take us into that.
It's hard. And, funny, I got traded back to Minnesota and I was 33 and I had a great playoff. I played as well as I ever did. We lost to Pittsburgh in the finals. Mario Lemieux, who, with Gretzky and a couple of others, you can make an argument, greatest player ever. And so that was great. And the 2 years after that were hard. And you realize, I still laugh. Hockey players have a great sense of humor. We had 3 guys on the team who were first pick overall in the draft. Mike Modano, who was just starting his career. Brian Bellows, who was probably the top player on the team. And I was there as well. And a guy named Basil McRae looked at the 3 of us sitting in the corner one day, and he said, "Look, this is great, the past, the present, and the future." Yeah. And it was great, but it was true.
Yeah.
But it's hard. You try and be a good influence on the younger guys. You try and you understand. Hey, look, I'm not a 40-goal scorer anymore. I'm not going to be, when the other team gets a penalty, I'm not going to be jumping over the boards automatically to go out and run the power play and get us a 1-0 lead. And you get to that point. But as I said, the good news was it was very easy for me to retire. I remember in the middle of my career, we had a Players Association meeting during training camp. And the guy from the Players Association said, "Okay, who is going to decide when they've had enough playing hockey, and who's going to come to training camp some year and not make the team, and who's going to decide?" And I put up my hand, and I looked around. I was the only guy in the room. And so at the end of my year, our team missed the playoffs my first year and my last year in the NHL. And late in the season, I went to the vice president of the team and I said, "Hey, final game Sunday. I want to have a press conference Tuesday. I'm out." And he said, "Great." And it was, as I said, easy decision, easy for my transition, because I know a lot of guys, it's very hard when they finish playing. And, I was ready.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, after a career, I mean, there really wasn't probably many more accolades too that you maybe wanted to achieve. But so the mindset then shifts from being the difference maker to being a good influence on these guys. You obviously had a huge platform with those 2 1-1s overall that you can pour into and help guide them in their career to be as great athletes as well. Then you just naturally go into a GM role. How, as a GM, did you feel like you still had an impact in the locker room, other than trading and signing players? How did you feel like you were still able to be a difference maker from the GM state?
Well, it's kind of funny, and I'll diverge a little bit about how I went from player to GM. So I went back to the University of Minnesota for 3 years when I finished playing. And I finished my business degree and got an MBA. And then there was a businessman in town who was going to, a guy named Richard Burke. I'm still friends with Richard and his son. And he was going to buy the Winnipeg Jets and move them to Minneapolis. So I got a hold of him and I said, "Listen, you're going to move the team to Minneapolis. I'd like to be a part of it." And he said, "Hey, great. I watched you play. I remember you. Let's go out and have lunch." So we had lunch several times, and he said, "Look, I can't make a deal with these guys in Minneapolis. I'm going to move the team to Nashville. You interested?" And I said, "Great. I'm in. We'll talk." Had lunch a few more times, and he says, "Well, NHL is going to put in an expansion team in Nashville. That's not happening. But I'm taking the Winnipeg Jets and moving to Phoenix. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm there." So this was 1996, and that's how I started to get involved in management. And so 38 years old, I got my first job, and it was general manager of the Phoenix Coyotes. But, it was good. I think I had some credibility with the players, having played for 15 years. I said many times I learned more about business playing for the Montreal Canadiens than I did get an MBA at the University of Minnesota. And I was able to bring that in because Montreal, I think they, not so much now, but at that point there was still a special organization. And so, talk to the players, try and, it was a franchise. We had a good team. We really never broke through, never won a playoff round when I was with the Coyotes. But you try and have that relationship with the players. It's different from a coaching relationship. I wouldn't want to be a coach where I'm around the players every day, but I liked the general manager job. If you felt like you go see your minor league team play or go join the scouts on a tour, you could do that. And it was a much more diverse job than being a coach. But, You just try and bring what you can to make your team and your organization a really good organization, which I understood in Montreal.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So, kind of tell us a little bit of obviously faith is very important to you. When did that kind of become a big factor in your life? Was that in the middle of your playing career? Tell us a little bit about that and just the ultimate aspect of faith in the locker room in the NHL world.
Well, I think, like a lot of evangelicals, I grew up a Catholic. And I remember Hugh Ilsley, who we both know well, and really started Tales on the Tour.
Yes.
First Bible study I was in with him, I think there was 12 or 14 guys. And he said, well, how many guys grew up Catholic? And I think 10 or 12 hands went up. So I always, growing up, Catholics were serious about their faith. The Protestants I knew were Christian and Christmas and Easter Protestants.
Yeah.
And so it was probably when I got to, and I considered myself to be very serious about my faith. Now, my wife grew up in an evangelical family, and as it was, my mother, who died before I got married, said to me, "If you're not marrying a Catholic, don't bother inviting me." So you kind of had that attitude.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was probably after my career that I really realized, the reality. We've got 3 kids. While I was gone every weekend playing hockey, watching hockey, scouting hockey, she was at Bible study. She was at church with the 3 kids, driving them back and forth to Scottsdale Christian Academy,
Yeah.
SCA.
Okay.
So, and basically it was, I have the belief, but are you going to get on board? And understand that it's a relationship with you and Jesus, and hey, I've got nothing against Catholics. I think it's a marvelous faith, and my family are still Catholics, but really made that jump at that point, and spent more time with the Bible and Bible studies and talking about it, and 2 of our 3 kids went to Point Loma Nazarene.
Okay, that's
and
very cool.
So basically it was probably after I finished playing. One of my favorite stories. Again, still a good friend of mine. The year I was first pick in the draft, Ryan Walter was second pick in the draft, and we're still friends now. We became teammates in Montreal, won the Stanley Cup together. But he was the first evangelical Christian in the locker room, and he really had a lot of respect. He was the youngest, when he played for Washington, he was the youngest captain in the history of the NHL. And we used to kid him when we were playing New Jersey. Guys, we're playing the Devils tonight. Wally doesn't want to lose to these guys.
Yeah.
Come on, let's pull together, But he used to laugh. But I just kept thinking back to him and what a strong guy he was, and what a sincere guy he was, and how he lived it. And I still compliment him on that. We're in a Bible study together, small group together every couple of weeks with our wives on Zoom. And, you never know who you're having an influence on.
Yeah, absolutely. So now kind of, talking before this, you mentioned that there's kind of a growing faith aspect within the NHL, and it may not have the chaplain system as built out as, the MLB or NFL, but speak a little bit of just the movement inside the NHL and what you're doing to help push that along.
Well, I just to divert again, I find that's going on in the greater sports world. You see Olympic athletes saying this gold medal is nice, but you know what my real purpose is? It's my relationship with Jesus. You see the Ohio State football team, my new favorite football team, by the way, and these guys professing their faith and being out there, and it's fabulous. But hockey is behind. And I think a lot of it is, hey, the Bible Belt is in the southern United States. It's not in prairies of Western Canada.
Yeah.
And so, but there's a very strong movement. And 20 years ago when I bought the Mooseheads, Halifax Mooseheads, which is, I'd probably say to your listeners, there's 3 junior leagues in Canada, and half the guys in the NHL come through our league. About 25% are American college and 25% are European. So that's about the breakdown.
Yeah.
The most valuable player in the NHL last year, Nathan McKinnon, played on my team in Halifax. the best player in the world over the last decade and a half is Sidney Crosby. He played in our league. The current best player in the world, Connor McDavid, who plays for Edmonton, he played in Canadian junior hockey. So that's what Canadian junior hockey is. So
it's the real deal.
yeah. So the director of Hockey Ministries Atlantic gave me a call 20 years ago because the NHL was pulling their AAA teams out of Atlantic Canada. Just logistically, it didn't make sense. And junior hockey was moving in and became far more successful. So he called me up and said, you know, Bobby, the team from St. John is moving, the team from Moncton is moving. Is there any chance you'd be interested in having a chapel with your team? I said, hey, sounds like a great idea. And he said, what? You know, so that was probably the beginning of the chapel program in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. We have 12 or 13 teams now with active programs.
It's awesome.
And you know, you go on each team's website, coach, assistant coach, strength and conditioning coach, team chaplain. It's really got a ways to go. It's not NASCAR, but you know, I get a real kick out of the fact that we've been able to influence a lot of young lives, and you also get to plant the seed. Maybe at 17 or 18, a kid goes into the chapel because he smells the pizza that they're having, and he goes. But he's 26, and now he's you know, it's real life, and his wife is pregnant, and all of a sudden, you know, he's off and on a different path. So that was very rewarding as well.
Yeah, it's that crucial time because, you know, in the U.S., that's like the age, obviously, you're going off to college, and there's a lot of lifestyle and changes. So when you go into that junior hockey league, it's that same time frame. And so to be able to plant that seed for them and just look at your life, I mean, you had those seeds planted through your whole life.
Exactly.
And maybe it clicks more at a certain point or not, but you know that there's at least something there. And you can think back to the people in your life that you're super thankful for that did plant that. And so it's super cool that being a feeder program for the NHL, to be able to put that right then and there, so when they move on into the NHL career, they get the big paychecks, they do that, they have that they can come back to when life gets hard, and they can think and grow, especially with
and some of the stories, as you can imagine, are just fabulous. You know, you'll get the player who got the Christmas card, asked for a Bible, and the next year he asked if he can have one for his dad. You know, so it's it's terrific stuff.
Yeah, that's so rewarding. And you know, and kind of to just jump back a little bit, I know it's kind of like ping pong, but there was a story of your career where over a Christmas break you guys were able to go into a hospital and do some work. Tell us a little bit about the influence that situation also had on your life.
It was such a God thing. It was the end of my career, and again, I was there with the past, the present, and the future. All walked into that hospital room that day, and you know, we had a lot of good players on the team, and at that point, I wasn't one of them. But there's a kid sitting in the corner with a North Stars jersey that says Bobby Smith on the back, and I'm thinking, wow, maybe your dad gave it to you. You know? So I went over and got talking to him, and he had brain cancer, and was in for surgery, and you know, we talked, but. You know, these Christmas visits, a lot of the time, you know, hockey players are busy. You got your own Christmas to get ready for. You know, you hate to say it, sometimes they're as much of a chore as they are the ability to spread joy. So I go home and I hope I can keep myself together as I tell this story. So I come home, and around February, my wife says, why don't you give Paul Eagles a call? And I said, why would I give Paul Eagles a call? You know, I met him 2 months ago, and she says, well, why don't you give him a call? So I called, and his mom picked up the phone, and she said, Bobby, I can't believe you called today. And I said, well, what is it? Well, Paul got up this morning, and he said, Mom, I'm done. No more chemo, no more anything. I'm going to stay in bed. I'm going to go home to Jesus. So I said, put him on. So Paul, how you doing? Great. Hey, how you doing? Great. Listen, looks like we're playing Chicago in the playoffs. Oh, yeah. You know, they're first place. We're 16th place. We're going to play them. I'll tell you what, you got tickets to every game if we're in against the Blackhawks. He says, great. Jumps out of bed, goes to his doctor's appointment. Well, we get into the playoffs. We beat Chicago in the first round, and you know, one of the biggest upsets ever. But you know, the Eagles are still friends of mine. And Paul, still in Minneapolis, works at a grocery store.
Wow.
And I said, well, what's it like at work, Paul? What are you doing? And he says, well, I come in and I tell people about Jesus and Bobby Smith. It's a pretty good job. So, and this was, I'll tell you, it was a God thing from start to finish. And, I still laugh about it with Paul and his mom and his dad. But, it's like here I was, I just got used, for God's purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I get goosebumps just hearing that story
Oh,
because
well, this is as well as I've ever been able to hold it together telling that story. So
yeah, I mean, I was tearing up. I was probably more moved by you, but so just that's the epitome of sport, though. Like that is the way that when you talk and when we look at this, that's the way that God has intended sport to be used.
Yeah.
And if I go in there and just on a random hospital visit, I don't necessarily have that same impact as the platform that you had that day. I mean, it's no coincidence that that kid was wearing your jersey and that you were there. And so to be able to be aware and just let the Spirit move and let God work through you is so cool. So just thank you for those. I'm sure there's a lot of opportunities too like that.
I'm just so humbled that that happened that day. And here we are now, 30 years later, and Paul's doing well, and it's a remarkable story.
Yeah, and that's just encouragement to the athletes out there to never take those situations for granted. You never know who you're crossing paths with and what you're able to have an impact. And the cool part of that story is you actually are still friends with them, and you have that contact, so you get to see the legacy that kid who was down on his luck, down on his hope, but God had a plan, and he had a plan for you to help encourage, and just the life that had for that kid, and the legacy, and now the lives he's been able to impact through just telling people about Jesus. Yeah, so that's so cool. So kind of take us now into you're done with the GM. You just sold your team that you owned for 20 years, the Halifax Mooseheads. What does life look like for you now? I understand you got a couple of grandkids. Tell us a little bit about that transition for you.
Well, it's been a year and a half, and I had a contract to consult with the team for 2 years, and at the end of the playoffs, I said, "Listen, a few months ago I was making decisions. Now I'm making suggestions." I said, and Sam Simon, who's a good friend of mine, a terrific guy who bought the team from me, said, "Hey, I understand." I said, "Look, any questions that come up, give me a call. I've been dealing with this stuff for 20 years, so if I can help you get around anything, do." So that worked out well. But no, in the year and a half, 6 grandkids. We spent a lot of time with them, and it's crazy. I'm looking to move into something more concrete, but I haven't yet. But it's what I say. I don't know what I've been doing, but I'm really busy. And we have 3 grandkids in Nashville. One of them had quite severe health problems, an affliction called autosomal polycystic kidney disease. He had a kidney liver transplant when he was 20 months old. We spent a lot of time with them, and we're experiencing an absolutely miraculous recovery with him. He's a 5-year-old at kindergarten right now, and wasn't supposed to live past day 1.
Really?
So we spent a lot of time with those guys. Over the last 5 years, I've been far better at compartmentalizing things than my wife. When I'm in Scottsdale, I realize there's not much I can do about what's going on in Nashville other than pray, whereas my wife is totally involved with it. And then 3 grandkids in San Diego, spend a lot of time with them, and I never knew my grandparents growing up. And it's nice to be, at my age in good health, while I can still chase them around and go skating with them or bike ride with them. And so we've spent a lot of time doing that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking again of just the impact. So take us a little deeper in that, if you don't mind. So I believe his name is Noah, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So he was basically, the doctors were saying not going to live past day 1. You're now saying it's over 5 years. What is are you still in touch with those doctors who gave the prognosis of that?
Well, I know my daughter-in-law is, because she sees him at the hospital. He's at the hospital regularly. But it was really an incredible story because they found out, 4 or 5 months before he was born, that this was the affliction he had. And the doctors kind of tiptoe a thin line. Here's what you can do, and some people abort in this situation, and my son and his wife said, listen, we live this faith or we don't. And it was a really inspiring and remarkable tale to think that for 406 straight nights they gave him kidney dialysis in his own bedroom.
Wow.
And it was, the brushes with death and the setbacks and the discouragement, but to their credit, they maintained their faith so strongly throughout. And here he is now, 5 years old, ball of fire, riding his bike, going to kindergarten. But a miracle upon miracle. And the medical staff, their medical team at Vanderbilt in Nashville, they've said, we're done with predictions. Every time we tell you what could happen to Noah, he proves us wrong. So if you don't mind, we're done with prognosis. We're done with predictions. We're just going to watch what happens, and it's been a miracle.
Yeah. A living miracle. That's awesome. Well, we'll continue to be praying for that situation.
And she's out there on Instagram and influencing tons of people, tons of young families in the same situation, and literally a prayer group in 5 continents around the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, if there's a way that we can be a part of or help bring awareness to that as well, we'd love to support, because that's one of the things that is so cool what God has allowed through this podcast is we bring on athletes like yourself to share these stories of success and triumphs and hardships and just your overall walk with Jesus, how he can encourage. But we also want to build a body of believers who pray for these athletes, just as you were saying that Ohio State is now your favorite football team. Like, when as a believer, when you find out other like-minded believers, you just get excited, and it's now another person that you can pray for, because there's so many temptations and things that come to these athletes, whether they're still playing or not. And so as a body of people listening to this, we want to be able to pray for you and your family to sustain you in the ministry of giving back to the NHL world and building that chaplaincy programs and your family and praying for those. So I just want to encourage you today that we're going to be doing that for you guys, and thank you for coming and sharing your time. And is there anything specifically that we can pray or bring awareness to help you guys?
You know what? I'm at that stage where it's your family. And it's the people and the people suffering hardships, and our country. I think a lot of us don't think the country is on the great track right now, and it's the greatest country in the history of the world. And as somebody who immigrated from another country, I'm in a unique, not a unique position, but I'm in a pretty strong position to say that. And I just think our country needs prayers. And I pray for our country every day.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Bobby, I feel like there's so many different things we could have talked about today. I mean, your career is just remarkable, and what God, basically put on this platform for you to be able to use. But if there's one thing that you can give back or leave the viewers with, what's one piece of advice or encouragement, maybe just like you would give to your junior players as they came in, maybe day one? What's a piece of advice that you wish everyone came in contact with Bobby, what they would know?
You know what? I laugh because so much of my quote unquote wisdom comes from either the Bible or country music. And there's a country music song where they talk about give faith a chance. And you know what? People, if you're not a believer, if you kind of witness it, or some guy, give faith a chance, because it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, off topic, but is country music big in Canada?
Country music is huge in Canada.
Okay. Man, yeah. I gotta get more versed on my skills. That caught me off guard. I was like, Canadian listening to country music. Okay. But no, that's awesome. And thank you again just for being here. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to pray for us as we go out. So dear Heavenly Father, thank you again just for this chance to get here and hear what you are doing through Bobby's life and his family. And thank you just for the platform that you've given him and all the highlights and wins that he's been able to achieve and be a part of in his career, God. And we thank you for that. Thank you for this podcast that we can build a body of believers to be able to come alongside Bobby and these other athletes and pray for him and his strength and his family, God. And we pray for his grandson, Noah, God, that you will be with him and his family. You'll just give them the strength and encouragement that they need to continue fighting. And just thank you for the joy of Noah, just that they get to watch him ride a bike and just grow up and go to kindergarten. God, as tough as it is, you say in your word, James, 1, 2 through 4, consider it joy when you face trials of many kinds because it strengthens your faith. And thank you for his daughter-in-law that is able to be able just to create a prayer group and support and just the light and the goodness and people coming to Christ through that situation, through that hardship. And we thank you for that and lift that situation up to you. And we pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
You're listening to the Identity Sports Podcast, where we dive into the world of faith, sports, and inspiration with athletes from across the country. I'm your host, Zach Vogel.